You have felt the pressure building. Medical certification is becoming harder to maintain. Aircraft ownership costs continue to rise. Insurance is becoming more difficult and expensive. Regulations are getting more complicated. Taxes and fees keep multiplying. And you may have started asking yourself a simple question. Why is owning an aircraft becoming so difficult? The answer is that the system increasingly favors access over ownership. The medical process creates a gate. Financial requirements create another barrier. Regulatory obligations add more weight, and renting becomes the easiest alternative. The FAA is not eliminating general aviation. It is changing the environment around ownership, making it harder for some pilots to carry the full burden of owning an aircraft while making rental operations increasingly attractive. Let's start with the medical system. The FAA recently held a listening session focused on improving the airman medical certification process. The agency acknowledged that the existing system has problems. It withdrew a proposal that would have issued initial denials to pilots who submitted incomplete documentation. Special issuance medical certificates have increased substantially since 2019, creating additional pressure on the system. The FAA has discussed modernizing the MedExpress system and creating clearer, plain-language guidance for pilots. These are positive developments, but they do not eliminate the underlying burden. The medical certification process remains a significant hurdle for many pilots. Mental health policy is another area where change is underway. The Mental Health in Aviation Act would modernize FAA guidance, reduce stigma surrounding mental health treatment, and provide additional funding to the FAA's Office of Aerospace Medicine. The legislation also includes funding for a public information campaign. A Senate companion bill has been introduced, while the House version passed unanimously by voice vote in September 2025. These developments represent progress, but they do not immediately remove the concerns pilots have about seeking treatment and maintaining medical certification. Now consider the rental economy. The FAA Reauthorization Act of 2024 expanded Basic Med. The maximum certified takeoff weight for covered aircraft increased to 12,500 pounds, while the passenger limit increased to 6. That expansion gives more pilots access to the simplified medical pathway. Basic Med is primarily intended for pilots who do not require a traditional FAA medical certificate and who operate within its limitations. More than 90,000 pilots have qualified under the program. The FAA has also concluded that Basic Med has not produced a measurable negative impact on aviation safety. At the same time, Basic Med represents a different approach to medical oversight. Pilots who qualify can work with a state-licensed physician rather than maintaining a traditional FAA medical certificate. That can reduce administrative complexity for recreational pilots. For many people, this makes flying more accessible. It also demonstrates that the aviation medical system can operate with a different level of federal involvement. The FAA has continued making changes to its medical guidance as well. The required observation period following cataract surgery has been reduced to 3 months. Recovery periods associated with LASIK and SMILE procedures can now be as short as 2 weeks in appropriate circumstances. The list of antidepressant medications acceptable under certain conditions has also expanded. The backlog associated with special issuance cases has been reduced significantly. These changes show that the agency is capable of modernizing the system, even though medical certification remains a major administrative component of aviation. Now think about your own experience. Have you ever been deferred? Have you waited months for a decision? Have you paid for additional tests or medical records because the FAA requested more information? Have you considered Basic Med? Have you thought about renting instead of owning? Those questions matter because the cost of ownership is not limited to the purchase price of an airplane. Insurance, maintenance, fuel, hangar space, inspections, taxes, registration, and airport fees all contribute to the total cost. When each category becomes more expensive, the financial pressure on individual owners increases. The tax system adds another layer. Aircraft used in business can qualify for significant tax advantages, but the rules surrounding aircraft depreciation and business use are complicated. The IRS has established precedent concerning aircraft leaseback arrangements and the treatment of certain losses. Business use requirements can also become important when claiming accelerated depreciation. If business use falls below the applicable threshold, depreciation recapture can become an issue. That means aircraft ownership can become substantially more attractive when the airplane is operated as a legitimate business asset. Flight schools, rental operations, and other businesses may be able to structure aircraft ownership around revenue-generating activities and applicable tax benefits. A purely private owner does not necessarily receive those same advantages. The FBO leaseback model is an example of how the economics can work. An aircraft owner provides the aircraft, while an FBO or flight school manages the aircraft and rents it to other pilots. The renters generate revenue, and the owner retains the underlying asset. For some owners, this structure can help offset operating expenses, but it also changes the nature of ownership. The aircraft becomes part of a business operation rather than being used exclusively for personal flying. The owner has to consider utilization, maintenance, insurance, management, scheduling, and tax requirements. It is no longer simply a personal airplane sitting in a hangar waiting for its owner to fly. Airport and FBO fees create another financial burden. Pilots routinely enter charges for tie-downs, overnight parking, facility use, infrastructure, security, handling, and special events. The FAA Reauthorization Act of 2024 required a study of FBO pricing transparency, while AOPA launched its Know Before You Go campaign to encourage pilots to understand airport and FBO costs before arriving. The problem is that not every fee is obvious in advance. A pilot may see an attractive fuel price and assume the airport is inexpensive, only to discover additional charges after landing. Checking prices before a flight has therefore become an important part of flight planning, especially when operating into unfamiliar airports. Another issue involves ADS-B data and taxation. State governments have explored ways to use aircraft tracking information to identify potential tax obligations. FAA officials have expressed opposition to using ADS-B information primarily for revenue collection. And the NTSB has also raised concerns about using safety-related data for economic purposes. Several states have considered legislation restricting the use of ADS-B information for fee and tax collection, while Florida has implemented restrictions and other states have considered similar measures. Federal legislation such as the Pilot and Aircraft Privacy Act has also been proposed to limit this practice nationwide. The debate is important because ADS-B was introduced primarily for aviation safety and traffic management. Aircraft broadcast information about their identity, altitude, speed, and position. Once that information exists, however, other government agencies may see potential uses for it. The question becomes whether technology created for safety should also be used to identify potential tax liabilities. Now consider aircraft ownership structures. The FAA recently invalidated registrations involving aircraft held through a UK-based trustee because of violations involving US citizenship requirements. Approximately 800 aircraft were affected. Those aircraft could not continue operating under their existing registrations until they were properly addressed. The incident demonstrates how important ownership structures can be. Trust arrangements are legitimate tools for aircraft ownership, particularly when international ownership issues are involved. But they come with specific legal and regulatory requirements. Owners using trusts need to understand who administers the trust, whether the trustee satisfies FAA citizenship requirements, and whether the structure remains compliant over time. Organizations such as NBAA have emphasized the importance of due diligence when using owner trusts. The aircraft may be your asset, but the legal structure surrounding it carries responsibilities. Failing to monitor that structure can create serious problems. All of these issues point toward the same broader reality. Aircraft ownership is becoming more complex. Medical certification can create administrative challenges. Insurance costs can rise. Maintenance costs can increase. Fuel remains expensive. Taxes and airport fees add additional expenses. Regulatory requirements continue evolving. That does not mean private aircraft ownership is disappearing. It means the economics of ownership require more planning than they did in the past. If you already own an aircraft, understand every part of the cost structure. Review your medical options. Know your insurance requirements. Understand your tax obligations. Monitor airport and FBO fees. If you use a leaseback arrangement, understand the business and tax implications. If your aircraft is held through a trust, make sure the structure remains compliant. If you are considering buying an aircraft, do the math before signing anything. Look beyond the purchase price. Calculate annual insurance, maintenance, fuel, hangar, inspections, taxes, registration, and unexpected expenses. Compare those costs with the cost of renting an equivalent aircraft. Renting can be an extremely practical option for pilots who fly relatively few hours each year. You avoid many ownership responsibilities and pay primarily for the time you actually use the aircraft. For pilots who fly frequently, ownership may still make financial and operational sense. The right choice depends on utilization, aircraft type, location, and personal circumstances. The important thing is not to assume that one model is automatically better than the other. Ownership provides control, availability, and the ability to choose and modify your aircraft. Renting provides flexibility and transfers many responsibilities to the operator. The aviation system is not necessarily designed to force every pilot into a rental aircraft. The changes we are seeing come from different objectives: safety, taxation, airport economics, insurance underwriting, and regulatory compliance. But the combined effect can make ownership more difficult for individual pilots. That is why understanding the system matters. If you can manage the medical requirements, financial obligations, tax rules, insurance costs, and regulatory responsibilities, aircraft ownership remains completely possible. But it requires more preparation than simply purchasing an airplane and flying it. If ownership no longer makes financial sense, renting is not a failure. It may actually be the most efficient way to keep flying. You still get access to the aircraft without carrying the full financial burden of ownership. The future of general aviation may involve a larger rental and shared aircraft market. It may also involve more sophisticated ownership structures, increased business use, and greater reliance on technology for regulation and tax enforcement. But private ownership is not disappearing. The real lesson is to understand the economics before making the decision. If you want to own, know exactly what you are getting into. If you prefer to rent, understand what you are giving up and what you are saving. The aviation environment is changing. Medical rules are evolving. Taxes are changing. Airport fees are changing. Insurance costs are changing. Ownership structures are receiving greater scrutiny. You cannot control every one of those changes, but you can control how prepared you are. Know the rules, know the costs, understand your options, and make the decision based on your actual flying needs rather than assumptions. Ownership is becoming more complicated, but it is still possible. Renting is becoming more attractive, but it is not the only path. The future of general aviation will likely contain both models. The question is not whether you can own an airplane. The question is whether ownership still makes sense for you.